Even disheveled and obviously drunk, Elizabeth commanded attention like a force of nature. Her famous violet eyes were bloodshot and rimmed with smeared mascara. Her legendary beauty slightly blurred around the edges by whatever combination of wine and pills had brought her to this moment. She stood unsteadily, ignoring the concerned murmurs of other diners and the nervous approach of a waiter. "You," Elizabeth said, her voice carrying that distinctive throaty quality that had made her famous, though now it was thick with alcohol and venom. Perfect little Audrey Hepburn. It was October 1967, and Rome was caught between seasons, the summer heat finally breaking to reveal the golden light that made the eternal city magical in autumn. Audrey had been in Rome for 3 weeks taking meetings about a potential film project and, truthfully, hiding from the chaos of Hollywood gossip about her divorce from Mel Ferrer. The Italian press had been kinder than their American counterparts, allowing her some semblance of privacy in the small restaurants and cafes she'd discovered during her years living in Rome. But privacy was impossible when Elizabeth Taylor decided you were worthy of her attention. Elizabeth began walking toward Audrey's corner table with the determined gait of someone who'd consumed just enough alcohol to feel invincible, but not enough to lose coordination entirely. She moved through the restaurant like she owned it, which, given her reputation for extravagant spending in Roman establishments, she very well might. Audrey set down her fork carefully, her half-finished plate of cacio e pepe growing cold as she watched Elizabeth approach. The other diners had gone silent, recognizing both actresses and sensing the electric tension crackling between them. Even the usually boisterous Italian conversations had died to whispers. "You know what I hate about you?" Elizabeth said when she reached Audrey's table, not waiting for an invitation before pulling out the empty chair across from her. She collapsed into it with theatrical grace, her emerald dress pooling around her like liquid jewels. "Good evening, Elizabeth," Audrey said quietly, her training in diplomacy kicking in despite the obvious threat of the situation. "How lovely to see you." "Lovely." Elizabeth laughed bitterly, reaching across the table to grab Audrey's wineglass and draining it in one gulp. "Everything about you is lovely, isn't it? Lovely and perfect and so goddamn elegant that the rest of us look like sluts in comparison." The words hit like slaps, but Audrey kept her expression neutral. She'd dealt with jealousy and hostility from other women before, though never quite so directly or from someone of Elizabeth's stature. The smart thing would be to excuse herself, to leave money on the table and slip out before this confrontation escalated into something that would make tomorrow's tabloids. But something in Elizabeth's eyes stopped her. Beneath the anger and alcohol, Audrey saw something achingly familiar, the exhaustion of someone who'd been performing strength for so long they'd forgotten what vulnerability felt like. "You want to know what Richard said to me yesterday?" Elizabeth continued, signaling imperiously to a waiter for another bottle of wine. "He said, 'Why can't you be more like Audrey Hepburn? She never causes scenes. More like Audrey fucking Hepburn.'" So this was about Richard Burton. Audrey had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in Hollywood had. Elizabeth and Richard's relationship was legendary for its passion and toxicity, their fights and reconciliations playing out in gossip columns and tabloid headlines. They'd divorced and remarried in a blaze of publicity that made their love story seem more like a public spectacle than a private affair. "I'm sure he didn't mean—" Audrey began. "Oh, he meant it." Elizabeth's voice grew sharper. "Saint Audrey, perfect Audrey, the actress who never gains weight, never gets photographed falling out of nightclubs, never screams at directors or throws things at her co-stars, the one who does charity work and speaks 4 languages and makes every other woman in Hollywood look like a circus act." The waiter appeared with wine, clearly uncomfortable but professional enough to pour for both women before retreating quickly. Elizabeth immediately grabbed her glass, while Audrey left hers untouched. "You think I don't know what people say about me?" Elizabeth continued, her voice growing louder. "That I'm vulgar? That I'm excessive? That I can't control myself? That I'm everything you're not?" The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Audrey could feel dozens of eyes on them, some openly staring, others pretending to eat while straining to hear every word. She knew that by tomorrow this confrontation would be in every gossip magazine in Europe, probably with photographs taken by hidden cameras. "Elizabeth," she said gently, "perhaps we should—" "No." Elizabeth slammed her glass down hard enough to splash wine onto the white tablecloth. "You don't get to be gracious and diplomatic, not tonight. Tonight you're going to sit here and listen to what it's like to be the other kind of woman, the messy kind, the human kind." There was pain in her words that went far beyond professional rivalry or romantic jealousy. Audrey recognized it because she'd felt it herself, though she'd learned to bury it so deeply that most people never saw it. The pain of being constantly judged, constantly compared, constantly expected to be either perfect or perfectly flawed, with no room for anything in between. "I've been married 7 times, Elizabeth said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. 7 times, Audrey. And you want to know why? Because I keep looking for someone who will love me without trying to change me, but they all want to tame me. Richard wants to make me more like you. Elegant, controlled, ladylike. Mike wanted me to be a perfect Hollywood wife. Eddie wanted me to be grateful for being rescued from widowhood. Every single one of them fell in love with Elizabeth Taylor, the legend, and then spent years trying to turn me into someone else. Audrey felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that surprised her. And what do you want to be? I want to be enough. The admission came out raw, unguarded. I want to wake up in the morning and not have to perform being Elizabeth Taylor. I want to eat dinner without photographers hiding in bushes. I want to have a conversation with my husband without it turning into a screaming match that ends up in Variety. She took another gulp of wine, her hands shaking slightly. You know what the worst part is? I look at you, and I see what I could have been if I'd made different choices. If I'd been smarter, more careful. If I'd learned how to be mysterious instead of obvious. Elizabeth, let me finish. Elizabeth's voice cracked slightly. I see you at premieres, at charity events, at parties, and you're always perfect. Your hair is perfect, your dress is perfect, your answers to reporters are perfect. You never stumble, never slur your words, never get caught in compromising photographs. And I hate you for it, because it makes me feel like a failure as a woman. The honesty was devastating. Audrey sat perfectly still, absorbing the weight of Elizabeth's confession. Around them, the restaurant remained frozen, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something extraordinary and terrible. But you want to know what I really hate? Elizabeth continued, tears beginning to streak down her cheeks, taking her carefully applied makeup with them. I hate that even drunk and angry and falling apart, I still want to be you. I still look in the mirror and wish I could trade places with perfect Audrey Hepburn. The silence that followed was complete. Even the kitchen sounds had stopped, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. Audrey reached across the table and gently placed her hand over Elizabeth's. The gesture was small, but in the charged atmosphere of the restaurant it felt monumental. You don't want to be me, she said quietly. Elizabeth looked up, her violet eyes swimming with tears and confusion. You think my life is perfect, Audrey continued, her voice so soft that Elizabeth had to lean forward to hear her. But you're seeing the performance, not the person. Yes, my hair is always perfect because I spend hours with stylists. Yes, my dresses are perfect because I have teams of people making sure I never appear in public looking less than flawless. Yes, my answers to reporters are perfect because I rehearse them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But perfection isn't the same as happiness, and performance isn't the same as authenticity. Elizabeth stared at her, momentarily speechless. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Audrey asked. I see someone who feels everything so intensely that it spills over. Someone who loves so completely that it terrifies people. Someone who's brave enough to be vulnerable in public even when it costs you everything. That's not bravery, Elizabeth whispered. That's stupidity. Is it? You've lived more in your 35 years than most people live in a lifetime. You've loved passionately, grieved deeply, fought for what you believed in. Yes, it's been messy and public and painful, but it's been real. Audrey's voice grew stronger. Do you know what my greatest fear is, Elizabeth? That one day I'll wake up and realize I've been so busy being perfect that I forgot to be human, that I'll have lived my entire life as a symbol instead of a person. But everyone loves you. They love the idea of me. They love Audrey Hepburn, the character I play in public. But how many people actually know me? How many people have seen me cry or lose my temper or admit that I'm terrified most of the time? Elizabeth's expression shifted, the anger in her eyes being replaced by something softer, more confused. You're terrified? Of what? Of everything, Audrey admitted. Of not being good enough, of being found out as a fraud, of growing old and losing the only identity I've ever known. Of dying alone because I've been so busy being perfect that I've never let anyone see who I really am. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Audrey had never said these words aloud, had barely admitted them to herself. But sitting across from Elizabeth Taylor, who wore her heart on her sleeve and her pain in her eyes, pretense felt impossible. The truth is, Audrey continued, I envy you as much as you envy me. I watch you with Richard, and yes, it's volatile and destructive, but it's also passionate and real. You fight with him because you care enough to fight. When you love, the whole world knows it. When you're angry, you show it. When you're in pain, you don't hide behind politeness and good manners. And when I make mistakes, the whole world knows that too. But at least you're making mistakes. At least you're living. Elizabeth sat back in her chair, processing this unexpected reversal. The restaurant around them remained silent, the other diners still pretending to eat while hanging on every word. "So what are you saying?" Elizabeth asked finally. "That we should trade places? You'll be the passionate, messy one, and I'll be the perfect, controlled one?" "I'm saying maybe we don't have to be either." Audrey's voice grew thoughtful. "Maybe we can learn from each other instead of resenting each other. Maybe perfection and passion don't have to be mutually exclusive." "How do you mean?" "You could teach me how to feel things without being ashamed of them. I could teach you how to protect yourself without losing your authenticity. We're both actresses, Elizabeth. We're both women trying to survive in a world that wants to put us in boxes. Maybe we'd be stronger as allies than as rivals." Elizabeth laughed, but it was a different sound now, less bitter, more surprised. "Are you seriously suggesting that Elizabeth Taylor and Audrey Hepburn become friends? The gossip columnists would have field days." "Let them. Maybe it's time we stopped caring so much about what other people think of us and started focusing on what we think of ourselves." For the first time since she'd sat down, Elizabeth's expression softened completely. The anger drained from her face, leaving behind something young and vulnerable that reminded Audrey of the child actress Elizabeth had once been. "You know," Elizabeth said slowly, "Richard told me once that you were the only actress in Hollywood he was actually intimidated by. Not because you were difficult or demanding, but because you seemed to know something the rest of us didn't. What did he think I knew? How to be happy?" The words sat between them for a moment, weighted with possibility. "Maybe," Audrey said gently, "we could figure it out together." Elizabeth looked at her for a long time, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. Then, slowly, she began to laugh. Not the bitter sound from earlier, but something genuine and warm. "Perfect Audrey Hepburn wants to learn how to be messy from Elizabeth Taylor. Now I've heard everything." "And Elizabeth Taylor wants to learn how to be happy from Audrey Hepburn?" Audrey replied with a small smile. "I suppose stranger things have happened." "Not many." Elizabeth reached for the wine bottle and poured fresh glasses for both of them. This time, Audrey accepted hers. "To being imperfectly perfect," Elizabeth said, raising her glass. "To being perfectly imperfect," Audrey corrected. They clinked glasses as the restaurant around them slowly returned to normal, conversations resuming, and silverware beginning to clink against plates again. But at their corner table, something had shifted fundamentally. Two legends had stepped out of their carefully constructed public personas and found something more valuable than perfection or passion. They had found understanding. The evening stretched on for another 2 hours, but the confrontation had become a conversation. They talked about their fears, their failures, their dreams beyond Hollywood. Elizabeth told stories that revealed her vulnerability beneath the bravado, while Audrey shared doubts that showed the anxiety beneath her poise. When they finally parted outside the restaurant, they embraced, not the air-kissing performance of Hollywood acquaintances, but the genuine hug of two women who had found unexpected kinship in their shared struggle to be human, while the world demanded they be icons. The next morning, the Italian papers ran photographs of their dinner with headlines speculating about everything from a secret feud to a surprise friendship. But neither woman cared about the speculation anymore. They had learned something far more valuable than what the gossip columns could teach them, that perfection was a prison, passion was a gift, and sometimes the person you think you hate most is actually the person who can teach you most about yourself. In the end, neither became the other. But both became more themselves. Audrey learned to feel without shame, and Elizabeth learned to love without losing herself. And Rome, with its ancient wisdom about transformation and rebirth, kept their secret while teaching them that the most beautiful stories are the ones where everyone wins.